Deciding which cards to buy when speculating or investing is tough. The opportunity cost dilemma is real. So how do you decide who to buy, what to buy, which grade, and when? Today I'm breaking down my thought process and all the different considerations that you need to keep in mind. Let's data dive. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Data Dive powered by Market Movers. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot. And while I'm still reeling from the second half collapse by my Lions, we were so close. I still think that looking at some football cards right now feels pretty relevant. And even if you don't buy football cards, you're going to want to stick around because it's more about the ideas here that I think are worth reviewing. Week's video is focused on the dollars. You all know that I love a good collector video, but I also enjoy the short-term speculation game and the long-term investment side of things. The problem is that there are so many cards in existence. It's not enough to have a hunch that a player might break out. It's not enough to know that key sets were the biggest grading companies. There are a lot of things to think about. So I want to unpack some of my thought process around that process today. And in return, I'd absolutely love it if you would give Market Movers a try if you're not already using it. It doesn't matter if you're purely a collector, purely an investor, or like most of us, somewhere in between. Market Movers is invaluable to everyone in the hobby for checking comps, tracking trends, and cataloging your collection. So visit marketmoversapp.com and use promo code DIVE when you check out. You'll get 14 days completely free to try it out, and then you'll get 20% off for life as long as you're subscribed. Now let's get into the data. So like I said, there are a lot of different considerations when you're thinking about buying sports cards, a lot of different questions you have to ask yourself. And the first question is, which players? You probably have like a general idea of some players or candidates who you might want to buy based on their play, based on what you think they might do in the upcoming season or in the playoffs, all those types of questions. So the first thing I would do is, let's say you narrow it down to a list of players. And for the example today, I'm focusing on this pretty much epically loaded 2020 NFL draft class with the quarterbacks. You've got Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, and Tua Tagovailoa. 5 guys who at this point, most people would prefer to have as their starting quarterback on their team, at least above a lot of the other guys. So the first thing I did here is I just came to price movements, really simple. I know some of you have asked for me to slow down and kind of show how I get to some of this data. So I go to price movements, I just put in those players' names here. I like to check the rookie card only box because if you're buying cards for speculation purposes, investment purposes, chances are you're probably focusing on rookie cards. That's always a safer bet. And I'm just looking at the last 90 days. When you're thinking about players, you need to understand where a card is and where the players are in their price cycle, in their price trajectory, to see if there's room for more of an increase or if the card has already peaked too far above the rest of the crowd. Now, Brock Purdy may be hot at a given time as a player. He may be right now, for example, heading to the Super Bowl. But if you check and you see that his prices are well above someone like Justin Herbert or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow, you might want to pump the brakes a bit. You're trying to avoid overpaying into that hype cycle. And instead, typically you're looking for guys who might be coming down or who sort of plateaued with an opportunity to go back up. So I'm looking at their prices over the last 90 days. Jordan Love, maybe unsurprisingly, he's up 70% across all of his cards, across 1.3K cards, 1,300 cards that we've tracked during that time frame. And that's not surprising. He broke out in the second half of the year. He almost upset the 49ers. Now I'm kind of going back and wishing that the Packers maybe would have won that game, knowing the outcome against the Lions. And then you've got Justin Herbert. There's starting to be a little bit of buzz around him. In fact, I think if I go to the last 7 days, we'll see, okay, not anything too significant. I feel like this last week at Culture Collision, I heard a number of people talking about Justin Herbert. I think there's buzz around him because of the coaching change. Everybody recognizes he's got talent. He's got talented receivers. He's got Austin Eckler. He's got a pretty solid defensive core that just needs to find a better scheme. So there's a lot of things potentially working in Justin Herbert's favor. Joe Burrow down, honestly, not as much as I would expect, at less than 5% in spite of the injury, in spite of his second career injury now. He hasn't really been able to consistently stay on the field. Jalen Hurts, another one that I missed on. I didn't really miss on it. He was up earlier in the year, and the Eagles were obviously rolling. And then for whatever reason, who knows why, I know Eagles fans are disappointed. That team just completely fell apart. They couldn't win a game. And Tua, obviously another same thing. He was hot 2 years ago to start the season. and then they cooled down. He was hot this year to start the season, and he still played well, and then they ultimately didn't win against the Chiefs in the playoffs. So I would come here and I would look at these prices and just sort of have an idea. Where are they headed? Where are their prices going? The next thing that I might do, I might come over and look at the same cards for each player. Now, in this case, I actually chose 5 rookies from 2020, from the same class, so it makes it very easy. Go find cards of all these players and just see, how do their prices compare? Does one seem like way too inflated above the rest? And in my opinion, I think that's still Joe Burrow. I know he made it to a Super Bowl. He's at 1.4K, and I pulled up these Prism autographs in a PSA 9. You can see the pop counts are a little bit all over the place with these players. 176 on both Tua and Burrow, 151 on Hurts, 212 on Herbert, much lower at pop 40 on Jordan Love. But when I see these prices and I look at these players, to me, it's kind of a coin flip with all 5 of these guys. Who could have the most success over the next 3 to 5 years? I know a ton of people are high on Love. Personally, I still want to see a little bit more out of him. I also just have a hard time buying a Packers player personally. Tua, I'm probably not sold on, but to see him at $371 on this card on December 30th, and to see Burrow at nearly, well, actually over, roughly 4 times that cost on January 10th, that to me, I don't know, that just doesn't quite add up. And it feels to me more like Burrow is inflated. It feels to me more like, yes, he's a really top-tier quarterback, but the injuries are concerned to me. The Bengals didn't look particularly good. There's just a lot of uncertainty there. And then you've got Herbert, who, he's a really solid quarterback. The problem has been the Chargers. It's been the coaching staff. He's put up all the points in the world. He's pretty much had the offense, the generated offense and stats that you would hope for in a top-tier quarterback if you're buying into their cards especially. It's just that their defense has been horrible and given up even more points in that time frame. You might have seen the statistic earlier this year that said the Chargers over the last 3 years have scored more points than any team in the NFL, but their defense has given up more points in that same stretch than any team in history in a 3-year stretch of games. So that's the problem. So now they've got brand new coach coming in, Jim Harbaugh. We'll see if he can turn things around there like he did with the 49ers some years ago and obviously with Michigan. So let's say you narrow it down and you look at Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, and you're like, these are the 2 guys. They're still the 2 clear-cut guys from the class. I've seen them win. I've seen them do things. And you kind of come in here and then you want to do a statistical analysis. You go to StatHead and you compare their stats over time. Obviously, more games played for Herbert, which is why some of the counting stats are going to be higher. But all in all, rate, passer rating, other things, very, very, very similar in terms of those numbers. So maybe you decide that the gap doesn't really make sense between the 2 guys, that you think that Herbert is on an upward trajectory with a new coach. It can only go up from here, whereas Burrow's been injured. Bengals seem kind of uncertain. So you come over and you want to look for arbitrage opportunities, and this is the second tip. It's about ratios. You narrow it down to 2, and you're looking for some kind of a thing that doesn't make sense, where one card is way more inflated than another one. So what I've done here, I go to our intelligence reports, and this is an unlimited feature. This is a feature that's part of our top membership tier in Market Movers. I put in these 2 players to make the comparison. I put in their rookie year, and then I hit search. So I'm just going to hide this. And what it does is it compares all the cards in our database that have sold over the selected time frame. I went 30 days just to kind of cast a wide net. And it compares the prices. It gives you the average ratio between the 2 of 1.4. So typically, on average, Burrow's selling for 1.4x Justin Herbert. And then it shows you the outliers. So you can see where he's really significantly outselling him. And this price outlier of 3 has everything to do with the fact that this is a color match. The orange ice is a color match, and it's very low pop, 22 and 54. It's a retail exclusive card, not out of every featured product. It doesn't look as good, or it's not as meaningful with Justin Herbert, and you see that a lot of times at the top of these lists when you're comparing things. If I keep scrolling down, you'll see some other orange color matches, see lots of other things, but then here's a really interesting one. So we're looking at 1.4. 2.44 on their raw field level silver. Now, if you know anything about Select, these field level silvers were not particularly rare this year compared to prior years. Compared to like 2018 and prior, they're actually somewhat common. But what I can do is I can click on this chart button, and then I'm going to open this in a new tab. So it compares those 2 guys, and I'm going to open this in a new tab because I want to show you how you can get to even more data from here. Scroll down, this little copy button on the web version of the app. If you click this, it's just going to quick pull up another version of it in another grade. You can change it here, but it's going to default to the highest next grade in the sequence. So I'm going to compare these two. So now I've got raw, PSA 10, PSA 10. I'm going to scroll down to this ratios section, and this is actually available to all users. And I'm going to scroll down here, and I can see there's a big difference here. Burrow's PSA 10 to his raw is only a 2.4 multiplier. That's actually a little lower than most situations. You see Pop 567, but the Herbert is at 4.6 and Pop 539. So presumably a similar gem rate on these. That to me says, wow, this is a huge gap, $82 versus $219. Maybe it's time that I start going to look for some raw field level Justin Herberts, see if they're grading worthy, but also just knowing that there's this huge gap between the two guys, that in of itself tells me this might be an opportunity if I'm looking at those two to go after that. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's say instead of focusing like on trying to find a specific player, you have a specific amount of money, and then you're looking at these same 5 guys saying, I'm okay putting money into any of these guys. I want to buy one card only. So what does my money get me? I'm going back to price movements. I'm putting in those same players, and I just put in $475 to $550, and I'm looking for cards to see what's out there. What types of things might I be able to buy? And I pull up all of these different results. And this is where, trust me, the 2.7 million cards and growing really shines in Market Movers. You won't find this type of data available in any other sports card app. I promise that. It's because we're sourcing the data for all of these different cards. You're able to come in and track exactly what's happened to all of them with very reliable 95 to 100% accuracy on our data, tracking over these different time intervals. So you can scroll down and you sort of eyeball them, and let's say you throw them all into a chart. And I put 5 different cards of these guys into this chart, all within that, let's call that price range, $500 to $550. And I can scroll down and I can just kind of see which ones of these do I think make sense. Let's start with the Herbert. You know, the zebras, people like the zebras. They're relatively short printed. They're not as short printed as people think they are. Not, again, on the recent years of Select as they fanned out and blew up that checklist in the print runs, but they're still relatively rare. I will say, however, that the die cut versions, not as popular. They don't always sit straight in the graded slabs. There's a lot of things about those that people don't necessarily enjoy. Here's that field level silver in a PSA 10. Very iconic. Great shot of Burrow, great looking card. These are relatively liquid at Pop 567. It's not a bad choice. The only thing I would say is I'd probably stay away from it, knowing that it's so inflated above the price of the Herbert. Here's Jalen Hurts. These rookie autographs, Purple Pulsar, are actually super short printed. And I'm going to show you something. I put that in for these 5 players for those. 3 of these have never even sold in a PSA 9, and it's Pop 3 and Pop 1 on Jordan Love and Hurts. I stay away from cards like that, which are especially high dollar and have no sales comps to go off of because there's no copies of them and have no legacy of being in the checklist. Nobody's really ever heard of Purple Pulsar autographs year over year. It doesn't cross over to basketball. I don't know what year they started doing those. It might have been 2020. If it was in prior seasons, you can show that it's just not that common to where I don't even know that. I stay away from those. If I'm looking for something speculative or even a long-term investment, I want something that has enough market presence or some kind of lineage that people can have confidence buying it if I decide it's my time to move it. These can be very difficult to sell even during a hype cycle if people don't know what to expect. And if they see that your last comp was a year and a half ago at $510 or 6 months ago at $510, they might not want to pay much more than that. So there's a problem there. This field level tie-dye, I think those are sneaky good value, just in general. I think they're really good value. So if you like Jordan Love, that might be an option. And then the golds, Panini did something funky with these golds and they made them lasered and they called them golds. I wouldn't love going after this card in particular. So that's the approach I would take. You can throw them all into a chart or you can just click out the details on price movements and try to laser in, no pun intended, on the card that you're interested in buying. If you want even more data, so 2.7 million cards in Market Movers isn't enough for you. You've got to see all the sales to know what's out there. Very easy. You go to sales history. This is where you can look up comps across 6 marketplaces, data going way back. This is a great resource for just quick comping and seeing what's available. I put in that same price bracket and I just did the last 30 days and I typed in Jordan Love, let's say you wanted to find. And then you can really just go into discovery mode and scroll. You can find out what's out there. Even if this is for your PC and you want a really cool card in this price range, you can see what your options are. And this is a much better approach, in my opinion, than trying to scour all the different checklists across many different websites. All right, so the next thing that I want to look at, what if you want to buy a stack of cards instead of a single card. Same approach. Justin Herbert, $100 to $125. I lasered it in here. I threw them all in a chart just to show you the example, and you could make the decision. Do you want to buy this one Justin Herbert card, the die cut Zebra PSA 10, or do you want a little more flexibility? Do you want to buy a PSA 9 Optic Hollow, a prism-based PSA 10, very liquid? Do you want to buy a Concourse Silver, also pretty liquid? This one in an SGC 10 and the Reactive Blue. You can buy a variety. You could just pick up multiple copies. This is sometimes a strategy that I really like to do, to where I can move out of one or two as prices go up, recoup my money on some of them, and try to get back to my investment being only 50% or even zero free on the rest of those cards. Then I have a lot of flexibility. Does it always work out? No. Does it work out as frequently as it used to during the COVID boom? No. But sometimes if you pick right and you decide you want to put a certain amount of money into a player, diversifying into a handful of cards, 2, 3, 5 different ones, might be a better bet for you than not. The last thing I want to look at, what if you really want to separate yourself from the emotion of the cards? You're afraid you would just get too attached to them and want to keep them for yourself, even if they spike. You can always look at sealed wax. 2020 football, at this point, seems to me to be a pretty good long-term investment looking at those players. You never know how they'll work out. First thing I'm looking at is all data and all these different box formats. Did you know that we have sealed products in Market Mover, tracking thousands of sealed products, which you can add to your collection, you can shop through our app on. So you've got all these different formats, and it's interesting because all this data going back here into 2020 and 2021 for this sealed product, and all of these are up, right? All of them are up except for this blaster box, which is essentially flat, which is really interesting. But I think we started tracking that a little bit later in our database. Up 12.5%, 49, 36%, 160%. So if we shift to the last 90 days, this is where I think, it gets kind of interesting. Some of these you can still lose on in the short term. It's possible. You can buy them at an inflated price point. Something like this, I think, is definitely worth keeping an eye on in the off season. As we're kind of before the NFL draft, while baseball's teeing off and everything, then you might start looking to these, just see if there's a little bit of a dip. There's enough stability, price stability in these, I think, that maybe you won't have an easy time finding a deal, but there is some vacillation you see on this chart. So overall, I want to know from you, what's your process to deciding who to buy and when to buy, which cards, etc. Let me know down in the comments. And while you're down there, do me a huge favor and like this video. Make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share it with a friend. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, happy investing, keep on collecting, and make sure to have fun.